we are a theater for people of all abilities. We actually started as a memoriam for my wife's best friend, Erin, who was actually confined to a wheelchair, was not able to get any roles because, as we know, it's kind of cliche not to cast wheelchair-bound people in theater for some reason. So this was created after her death as a memoriam for her. And we're more of an educational theater. Obviously we have no sets. We're doing a staged reading of A Christmas Carol. All our rehearsals were virtual, so this is the first time we've actually met each other. So it's kind of cool. We're a little different. Our big thing is we're not your average theater. A lot of social media that we have, so feel free to follow us. It is TRE, not TER, and 51 is spelled out. This is A Christmas Carol. We adapted the original novel. It's a little bit more, I don't want to say raw. It's just a different take of the classic tale. Lots of ups and downs. As we know, Christmas can be a lot of highs, a lot of lows with emotions and feelings. So you'll see a lot of that throughout. It is suitable for kids. There's no language or anything like that. Yeah, so I'm going to just stop talking and just let you guys enjoy the magic of what we offer. Thanks again for being here. Appreciate it.
Yes, there's no doubt whatever about that. Old Marley was as dead as a doornail. Scrooge was his sole executor, his sole friend, and sole mourner at his death. Scrooge never painted out Old Marley's name from the fern. There it stood years afterward, Scrooge and Marley. The fern was known as Scrooge and Marley, and sometimes people called Scrooge Marley's name, and Marley Scrooge's name. But Scrooge answered to both. It was all the same to him. Scrooge was tight-fisted and solitary. No wind that blew was more bitter than he. Nobody ever stopped him in the street to say, "My dear Scrooge, how are you? When will you come to see me?" No beggars implored him to bestow a trifle. But what did Scrooge care? It was the very thing he liked. Once upon a time, on Christmas Eve, old Scrooge sat in his counting house. It was a cold, bleak, biting weather, foggy, and he could hear the people in the court stamping their feet upon the pavement to warm them. The city clocks had only just gone 3, but it was quite dark already. It had not been light all day. The candles were flaring in the windows and the neighboring offices. The fog came pouring in at every chink and keyhole, and was so dense that the houses opposite were mere phantoms. The door of Scrooge's counting house was open so that he might keep his eye upon his clerk. Scrooge had a small fire, but the clerk's was ever so much smaller that it looked like one coal. But the clerk couldn't replenish it, for Scrooge kept the coal box in his own room. Scrooge was so focused on his clerk, ensuring the clerk wasn't padding the clock, that Scrooge jumped in fright when the front door opened and in walked Scrooge's nephew.
"Oh, Merry Christmas, Uncle, and God bless you."
Ah, humbug.
"Christmas? A humbug. Uncle, you don't mean that. I'm sure."
I do. Merry Christmas. What right have you to be married? What reason have you to be married? You're poor enough.
Come then, what right do you have to be small? What reason have you to be morose? You're rich enough.
Ah, humbug.
Don't be cross, Uncle.
What else can I be when I live in such a world of fools as this? Merry Christmas. Out upon a Merry Christmas. What's Christmas time to you but a time for paying bills without money, a time for finding yourself a year older? Every idiot who goes about with Merry Christmas on his lips should be buried with a stake of holly through her heart. If they be like to die, they had better do it and decrease the surplus population.
Uncle!
Nephew, keep Christmas in your way and let me keep it in mine.
Don't be angry, Uncle. Come, join us for dinner.
Why did you get married?
Because I fell in love.
Because I fell in love. The only thing more ridiculous than a Merry Christmas is falling in love.
Nay, Uncle, but you never came to see us before that happened. Why give it as a reason to not come now?
Good afternoon.
I want nothing from you. I ask nothing of you. Why cannot we be friends?
Good afternoon.
And a Happy New Year.
Good afternoon.
The nephew turned to leave, stopped at the door, and bestowed greetings of the season upon the clerk, who, cold as he was warmer in spirit than Scrooge, for he returned the greeting cordially back. Scrooge seemed to take comfort in the fruit of his labor and smiled smugly. Meanwhile, the fog and darkness thickened. The cold became intense. In the main street, some laborers were repairing the gas pipes and had lit a great fire, round which were a party of ragged men and boys. They were gathered warming their hands and winking their eyes before the blaze. The brightness of the shops, where holly sprigs and berries crackled in the lamp heat of the windows, made pale faces ruddy as they passed. At length, the hour of shutting up the counting house arrived.
You'll want all day tomorrow, I suppose?
It's quite convenient, sir.
It's not convenient, and it's not fair when I pay a day's wages for no work. Poor excuse for picking a man's pocket every 25th of December. But I suppose you must have the whole day. Be here all the earlier next morning.
I promise, sir. Thank you, sir. And Merry Christmas to you, sir.
Scrooge took his melancholy dinner in his usual melancholy tavern, and having read all the newspapers and beguiled the rest of the evening with his banker's book, went home to bed. He lived in chambers which had once belonged to his deceased partner. They were a gloomy suite of rooms, old and dreary. It so happened that Scrooge, having his key in the lock of the door, saw in the knocker, without its undergoing any intermediate process of change, not a knocker, but Marley's face. The hair was curiously stirred, as if by breath or hot air, and though the eyes were wide open, they were perfectly motionless. To say he was startled would be untrue, but he put his hand upon the key nonetheless, turned it sturdily, and walked in. He did pause with a moment's irresolution before he shut the door, and he did look cautiously behind it first, as if he half expected to be terrified with the sight of Marley's pigtails sticking out in the hall. But there was nothing on the back of the door except the screws and nuts that held the knocker on. So he said,
Pooh! Pooh!
and closed the door with a bang. Scrooge locked himself in, double locked himself in, which was not his custom.
Humbug!
Suddenly a clanking noise, deep down below the house, as if some person were dragging a heavy chain over the casks of the wine cellar. Scrooge then remembered to have heard that ghosts haunted houses and were described as dragging chains. The double-locked door flew open with a booming sound as if no lock existed, and that clanking noise was much louder on the floors below than coming up the stairs, then coming straight towards the door.
It's humbug. I still won't believe it.
Scrooge's demeanor changed when, without a pause, it came through the door, and Scrooge saw what it was.
I know him. Are these ghosts? I do not believe it.
Scrooge could see Marley quite clear. His pigtail, his usual waistcoat, tights, boots, and the hair upon his head. The chain which Marley was dragging with him had been clasped around his waist. It was long and wound about him like a tail, and it was made of cash boxes, keys, padlocks, ledgers, deeds, and heavy purses wrought in steel. His body was transparent.
How now? What do you want with me?
Much.
Who are you?
Ask me who I was.
Who were you then? You're very particular, I see.
In life, I was your partner, Jacob Marley.
Can you sit down?
I can.
Do it then.
Scrooge asked the question because he didn't know whether a ghost so transparent might find himself in a condition to take a chair. But the ghost sat down on the opposite side of the fireplace, as if he were quite used to it.
You don't believe in me.
I don't.
What evidence would you have of my reality beyond that of your senses?
I don't know.
Why do you doubt your senses?
Because a little thing affects them. A slight disorder of the stomach, perhaps. You may be an undigested bit of beef, a brat of mustard, a crumb of cheese, a fragment of an underdone potato. There's more of gravy than grave about you, whoever you are.
Scrooge was not much in the habit of cracking jokes. The truth is, he tried to be smart as a means of distracting his own attention.
Humbug, I tell you, humbug!
At this point, the spirit raised such a frightful and shook his chain with such a dismal and appalling noise that Scrooge held on tight to his chair to save himself from swooning.
Mercy! Dreadful apparition, why do you trouble me?
Man of the worldly mind, do you believe in me or not?
I do! I must. But why do spirits walk the earth? And why do they come to me?
It is required of every man that the spirit within him should walk abroad his fellow men. It is doomed to wander through the world and witness what it cannot share.
Again, the specter raised a cry
Ah!
and wrung his shadowy hands.
I wear the chain I forged in life. I make it link by link. Is its pattern strange to you?
Jacob, oh Jacob Marley, you speak comfort to me.
I have none to give, Ebenezer Scrooge. I cannot rest. I am here tonight to warn you that you may have yet a chance and a hope of escaping my fate. You will be haunted by 3 spirits. Without their visits, you cannot hope to shun the path that I tread. Expect the first tomorrow when the bell tolls 1.
Couldn't I take them all at once and have it over, Jacob?
Expect the second on the next night at the same hour, the third upon the next night, when the last stroke of 12 has ceased to vibrate. Look to see me no more. And for your own sake, remember what has passed between us.
The apparition walked backward from him, and at every step it took, the window raised itself a little, so that when the specter reached it, it was wide open. Scrooge became sensible of confused noises in the air, incoherent sounds of lamentation and regret, wailings of sorrowful self-accusatory penance. The specter, after listening for a moment, joined in the mournful dirge, and floated out upon the dark night. Scrooge ran to the window, desperate in his curiosity, and looked out. The air was filled with phantoms, wandering hither and thither, and moaning as they went, every one of them wearing chains like Marley's ghost. Scrooge slammed the window shut and went to utter the word home, but stopped at the first syllable. He did not dare to finish that word after the fright he just had. He therefore went straight to bed, without undressing and without another word, and fell asleep upon the instant. Stave 2. The first of the three spirits. When Scrooge awoke, it was so dark that looking out of bed, he could barely distinguish the transparent window from the opaque walls of his chamber. He was endeavoring to pierce the darkness with his ferret eyes when the chimes of a neighboring church struck the 4 quarters. To his great astonishment, the heavy bell went from 6 to 7, from 7 to 8, and thus until the 12th, then stopped. Hence, 12. It was past 2 when he went to bed. The clock must be wrong. An icicle must have gotten into the works. 12. Humbug.
Why, it is impossible that I have slept through a whole day and far into another night. It is impossible in the slightest.
He could make nothing of it. The more he thought, the more perplexed it was. Marley's ghost bothered him exceedingly. Scrooge maintained this state until the chimes had gone to precisely the hour of 1, when the clock rung its dull, hollow, and melancholy chime. Instantly, light flashed up in the room, and the curtains of the bed were drawn by a hand belonging to a face, a strange visage, like a child, yet not so much like a child. It wore a tunic of the purest white, and it was holding a fresh green holly branch.
Who and what are you?
I am the ghost of Christmas past.
Long past?
Now the past. Rise and walk with me.
Scrooge did not resist, and rise he did. But finding that the spirit made towards the window, clasped its shimmering white robe in supplication.
I am mortal. I most certainly will fall.
Bear but a touch of my hand, and you shall be upheld in glory.
They passed through the wall and stood upon a country road. The city had vanished. The darkness and mist had vanished with it, and it was a cold, crisp, wintry day, with snow upon the ground.
Good heavens. I was bred in this place. I was a boy here.
Your lip is trembling. Ready to collect the way?
Remember it. I could walk it blindfolded.
Strange you have forgotten it for so many years. Onward you shall go then.
They walked along the road, Scrooge recognizing every gate and post and tree, until a little market town appeared in the distance. Some shaggy ponies were trotting towards them with boys upon their backs. They were shouting to other boys, and all the boys were in good spirits, shouting to one another and running and playing.
These are but the shadows of the things that have been. They have no consciousness of us.
That's Fillmore. Great Scott, Fillmore. Oh, and Hugh, and Benedict, and Cecil. Merciful heavens, look how young they are. Amazing in how they're playing with one another. In a few years' time, in boarding school, they will drift apart from the other. Fillmore became entranced by horror and left the fray of boys, causing the others to resent him. Then they became obsessed in competition with one another and drove themselves to drink excessively.
The school is grown quite deserted. A solitary child, neglected, was left behind.
Scrooge knew who it was. They left the boys playing there and approached a mansion of dull red brick. It was a large home, but it was broken. The walls were mossy, the gates decayed. There was an earthy savor as the air was chilly and bareness was all around. The spirit pointed into a room of the house, and Scrooge's vision was drawn to a boy, the same boy from before, huddled in a corner with a gnarled blanket.
Poor boy. I wish, but it's too late now.
Yes. What do you wish?
Nothing. There was a boy singing carols at my door last night. I should have given him something, is all.
The ghost smiled and waved its hand.
Let us see another Christmas.
The boy who was huddled in the corner grew larger, older, in front of Scrooge's eyes. The boy, now grown up, was no longer huddling, but was pacing anxiously back and forth. The front door opened, and a girl, a lady, came racing in. She threw her arms around the man's neck, kissing him profusely and addressing him as, "Dearest, dearest brother."
Dearest brother, I have come to bring you home, home, home.
Home?
Yes, you insufferable ruffian. Home, home for good. Father is so much more kinder than he used to be. He spoke so gently to me one dear night. I was no longer afraid to ask him about you coming home, and he said yes. He followed it with a penny's worth for Herod, and with a message that you should come hence. But first, we are to be together all Christmas long and have the merriest time in the world.
She clapped her hands and laughed, standing on her toes to embrace him. Then she began to drag him in her childish eagerness towards the door, and he accompanied her.
Always a delicate creature, but she had a large heart.
That she did.
She died, but had, I think, children.
One child.
True.
Yes.
Although they had, in that moment, left the school behind, they were now in the thoroughfares of a city. It was plain to see, too. It was Christmas time again, but it was evening and the streets were lit. The ghost stopped at a certain warehouse door and asked if Scrooge knew it.
Know it. I was apprenticed here.
They went in and saw an old gentleman sitting behind a high desk.
Why, it's old Fezziwig. The breast is hard as Fezziwig, alive again.
Old Fezziwig laid down his pen and looked up at the clock. He rubbed his hands, adjusted his capacious waistcoat, and called out in a comfortable, oily, rich, and jovial voice.
Yo-ho there, Ebenezer!
Scrooge's former self, now a grown man, came briskly in.
Oh, yo-ho, my boy. No more working tonight. Christmas Eve, Ebenezer. Now, let's have those shutters up before you can say, Bob's your uncle.
My time goes short.
Halt! I remember the next.
What of it?
Oh, I wish to see it again. The joy old Fezziwig brought to the town. Myself, so happy.
Trifles. My time with you fast approaches, and there's more to see.
Scrooge was now a little older, in the prime of his life. His face had not the harsh and rigid lines of later years, but it had begun to wear the signs of care and avarice. There had already begun forming an eager greed in his eye. He was not alone, but sat by the side of a fair young girl in a mourning dress, in whose eyes were tears and seemed to sparkle the light in the room.
It matters little. To you, that is very little. Idolatry hath displaced me, and if it can cheer and comfort you better than I have tried, I have no just cause to grieve.
Displaced? What say you? I do not understand.
'Tis of no consequence, my dearest Ebenezer. You fear the world too much. All of your hope have merged into one: gain. I have seen your other aspirations and noble causes fall off by the wayside. Am I wrong?
What do you mean? Even if I may have grown wiser, I am not changed towards you. My affections for you still remain. Have not yours stayed true towards me?
The young woman did not reply, merely shook her head in sadness.
Have they not?
Our contract is an old one, made when we were both poor and content to remain so. However, you are changing. When it was made, you were another man entirely.
I was a boy.
Your own feelings tell you that you are not what you were. Even now, you are not honest with thyself. That which promised while happy with our two hearts as one is fraught now with misery. How often I have thought of this. I will not say to you, it would not be just. It is enough for you to know that I have, and therefore, I can say to you true. I release you.
Have I sought release?
In words, no, never.
In what then?
Your changed nature, your altered spirit, and everything that made me, my love, valued and worthy in your sight. Tell me true, Ebenezer, if we had not met until now, and you say that you have grown into a man, would you try to win me over?
You think not.
I would gladly think otherwise if I could. If you were free today, tomorrow, yesterday, whenever, can you believe that you would choose a dowerless girl over your gain? If so, I beg your forgiveness, and I'm yours forever. If not, I release you, Ebenezer. I release you with all of my heart, for I shall never love again.
There was a long pause. Ebenezer dare not look at her. His gaze was on the floor. The young woman would not shed a tear. It seemed like the two of them were not breathing. Finally, when Scrooge did not make any movements or express any sign, the young lady spoke.
May you be happy in your life, the life you have chosen.
She turned away from him and left, leaving him staring at the Quran.
Spirit, show me no more. Why do you delight to torture me? No more, please. Take me home. I wish to see anything else.
One shadow.
They were in a different house now, one that Scrooge did not recognize. The room was not large, but was full of comfort. It felt warm and clean. Scrooge cried out in agony when he saw the young woman from a moment before, now grown and married, sitting in a rocking chair with a young child in her lap. Scrooge became aware of other children in the room and realized that the noise in the room had been muted. Once aware of this fact, did the tumultuous noise hit his ears. It was joyous, cheerful, and full of life. Suddenly, the front door opened, and in walked a very handsome man with presents in his arms. As he walked into the house, the cold air accompanied him, and the fireplace flickered as the air hit the warm fire. All the children cheered for the man, and the woman smiled and waved happily at him as he turned to shut the door and place the presents on the floor at the base of the door.
Alice, dear, I saw an old friend of yours this afternoon.
Yes. Who was it?
Guess.
How can I, my silly and loving husband? I surely do not know. Mr. Scrooge.
Aye, Mr. Scrooge it was indeed. I passed by his office window, and as it was not shut up, I decided to take a sneak peek. He had a candle inside. I could scarcely see him, and there he was, huddled over some papers and writing. His partner lies upon the brink of death, and yet here he is, Mr. Scrooge, sitting alone with his papers and writing. Quite alone in the world, I do believe.
Spirit, remove me from this place. I cannot bear the pain anymore.
I told you these were the shadows of the things that have been. They are what they are. Do not blame me for your shadows.
Scrooge turned on the ghost in an attempt to strangle it. But in the event that they could call it that, there was no visible resistance from the ghost. And Scrooge passed right through the spirit and fell onto his own bed, back in his room once again. The spirit had left. He was conscious of being exhausted and was overcome by an irresistible drowsiness. He barely had time to lay down comfortably before he sank into a heavy sleep. Stave 3, the second of the three spirits. Awakening in the middle of a prodigiously tough snore, Scrooge felt that he was restored to consciousness in the right time and sat up immediately, for he did not wish the next ghost to take him by surprise this time around. He would challenge the spirit upon the instant. When the bell struck 1 and no shape appeared, he began to tremble quite frightfully. 5 minutes passed, 10, 15, still no spirit. Then, at last, he heard a noise. It came from the adjoining room. Scrooge could not make out what the noise was, but he was curious to find out. Upon opening the door, he discovered a room full of green and red light, and lots of holly and trees all around. It felt very warm and cheerful inside, and when his eyes adjusted to the light, he noticed a woman sitting in the center of the room.
Come in! Come in and know me better, man!
Scrooge entered timidly and hung his head before the spirit. He was not the dogged Scrooge he had been. He was already a defeated man, and wished this spirit no ill will.
I am the ghost of Christmas presents.
Spirit, conduct me where you will. I went forth last night on compulsion, and I learned a lesson which continues to work. If you have something to teach me tonight, it would please me to begin the lesson now.
Touch my robe.
Scrooge did as he was told and touched the green robe of the spirit. They were transported to a house that Scrooge recognized, one that was in the poor area of town, the home of the Cratchits, Mr. and Mrs. Bob and Emily Cratchit. Their home was well decorated for the Christmas holiday, and Emily Cratchit was making supper in the cauldron as Bob Cratchit came in, hauling a small girl on his shoulders. The girl was holding a crutch in one hand, while the other held her father's head for balance.
And how did our little Tina behave today?
Well, as good as gold, and better, somehow. She gets rather thoughtful sitting by herself so much, and thinks the strangest things you ever heard. She told me, coming home from church, that she hoped the people at church would see her because of her immobility, and that it might help them to remember upon this Christmas day who it is that made the lame walk and the blind to see.
Bob Cratchit had taken Tina off his shoulders and had been rubbing his hands by their fireplace, warming the best he could because the fire was so low.
Strong and hearty. Every day she is.
Bob Cratchit was lying. He had turned away from them after he had finished his words. Tina was not getting better at all. She was getting worse, and he knew it. He didn't need a doctor to tell him that this would be the last Christmas they would have with her. He found a way to compose himself and turned back to the family.
A Merry Christmas to us all. God bless us.
God bless us. Merry Christmas.
God bless us, everyone.
Spirit, tell me, will Tina live?
I see a crutch upon the floor, where Tina should be, a crutch without an owner. I see parents torn apart with grief, separated. If these shadows remain unaltered by the future, the child will die.
No, I beg you, please say that she will be spared.
If she be like to die, she'd better do it, and decrease the surplus population.
Scrooge hung his head with regret recognizing the words he uttered to his nephew earlier. Scrooge did not notice that they had moved on from that house, that the spirit had transported them elsewhere. Scrooge began hearing people talking, but it sounded like it was coming from a great distance. He heard someone laughing, and as he raised his head, the voices suddenly became loud and clear, and he was standing outside surrounded by a couple. It was snowing, but not cold. Scrooge knew immediately where he was, and he recognized his nephew instantly.
He said that Christmas is a humbug, as I live, and he believed it too.
More shame on him, then. You cannot control his thoughts and beliefs. God bless his soul.
This was the woman his nephew had been talking about. It was the first time Scrooge had seen her, and she was very pretty, exceedingly pretty. She had a dimpled capital face and the sunniest pair of eyes he had ever seen. When she laughed, Scrooge melted.
He is a comical old fellow, that he is. However, his offenses carry their own punishment. I have nothing to say against him.
I'm sure he's very rich, my dear. At least that's what you always tell me.
What of it, my darling? His wealth is of no use to him. He does no good with it. He doesn't make himself comfortable with it. He doesn't make others comfortable with it.
I have no patience with him.
Oh, I have. I'm sorry for him, but I couldn't be angry with him if I tried. Who suffers from his ill whim? Himself. Always. He makes it into his head to dislike us, and he won't come to dinner with us. What's the consequence? He doesn't lose much.
Indeed.
What I mean is, that the consequence of his taking a disliking to us is that, and refusing to is that I think he loses pleasant moments with us. I give him the same chance every year and will continue to do so, but those moments, they'll be gone forever. I feel sorry for him.
Indeed.
A Merry Christmas to him then, and a most joyous New Year.
Hear, hear.
They were back in Scrooge's room so quickly that Scrooge didn't know when they were back in his room.
My time on this earth draws nigh.
What becomes of you upon your leave of me?
I cannot say, for I do not know. There's never been a time where I've come into existence like this. This is my first glimpse into your realm, Ebenezer, and I dare say it's memorable. I like it very much.
I think I may take what I have for granted, Spirit. I thank you for your lesson. I wish all the best to wherever and whoever you go to next.
The spirit bowed in a very grandiose way and then disappeared while Scrooge was in the middle of blinking. Scrooge felt very alone and cold, but he didn't have to ask misery for long, as his eyelids became heavy and consciousness left him one more time. Stave 4, the last of the spirits. Upon wakening again, Scrooge became aware of a mist all around him. As the sleepiness began to wane, he was able to make out a solemn phantom, draped in a dark hood which covered his face, coming, floating towards him slowly, moving as if part of the mist itself. When the spirit was close enough, Scrooge knelt with one knee in front of the spirit, which stopped as slowly as it was moving once upon him. It did not move after that, nor did it speak. Scrooge remained knelt, with his head bowed for quite some time thusly, before finally raising his head to address the spirit.
I am in the presence of the ghost of Christmas yet to come.
The spirit answered not, but raised its arm and pointed beyond Scrooge with his hand.
You are about to show me shadows of the things that have not happened but will happen.
The spirit did not falter from whence it was. Arm pointed out, showing Scrooge something that was behind him, beckoning Scrooge to look.
Ghost of the future. I fear you more than any specter before. For I know your purpose is to do me good, and as I hope to live to be another man from whence I was, I am prepared to give you company, and shall do so with a thankful heart.
The spirit remained still, its arm in the same place, not asking nor demanding, just motionless with its arm outstretched and pointing on.
Lead on, then. Lead on. The night is waning fast, and it is precious time to me, I know. Lead on, spirit.
The spirit at last moved. It moved as slowly as it approached, and the mist moved with it. Scrooge obliged the speed, grateful that it wasn't lightning fast from the previous spirits. The spirit traveled slowly into the city, but everything around them moved at the normal pace. Scrooge could see the town preparing for dusk, candles being lit on the street, people coming to and fro and about the streets and marketplaces. The spirit stopped, drifted over by a lot of men who seemed to be discussing something. The spirit's hand raised slowly and pointed at the men, and Scrooge realized that he could now hear what they were saying.
No, I don't know much about it. I only know that he's dead.
When did he die?
Last night, I believe.
What was the matter with him? I thought he would never die.
Oh, God knows.
What has he done with all his money?
Haven't the foggiest left it to his company, I wager.
He most certainly didn't leave me any.
It will be a cheap funeral, that's for certain. I don't know of anyone who will attend, apart from the clergy and the undertaker.
Hey, I'll go if he's providing the loan.
The spirit's hand fell to its side, and the voices of the men muted. The spirit glided along the street, Scrooge in his tow. Though the town they went ever so slowly, the spirit eventually drifted to a stop outside of a very run-down home and raised its arm at the house, and Scrooge understood to go inside the house. Inside, a woman was pacing around the room in a circle, and Scrooge was aware how cold it was in the room. Scrooge was also aware that the house he was in was actually a one-room parlor. There wasn't a fireplace, nor a bed, nor a table upon which to eat. There wasn't time to reflect. Further, for the door opened and the woman's husband came in, shut the door, and then stared at his wife for the longest of moments. The woman had ceased pacing when her husband arrived, and was now keenly anxious at what he had to say, for she rushed to him and excitedly asked him,
Is it good or bad?
It's bad.
We are quite ruined.
Oh, no. There is hope yet, my sweet Caroline.
Only, if he relents. Nothing is past hope, but only if such a miracle has happened.
He is past relenting, Caroline.
He's dead.
It was the first time the woman ceased her movements. Her hands went to her face, and she had taken a step back in shocked amazement.
Remember when I tried to see him and obtain a week's delay, and I could not find him present at his house, and I thought it was a mere ploy to avoid me? We had thought it was because of the rumors of his being ill. It turns out it's because he's dead.
Merciful Evan. Too late if I didn't get transferred.
I haven't the faintest idea. But until then, we shall be ready with the money. In the meantime, my dear sweet Caroline, we can have a proper meal this evening.
Yes! It would be bad fortune indeed, my darling Jonathan, to have a merciless successor in credit as Ebenezer Scrooge. Good riddance to him!
Scrooge, having realized that this version of the future was about his death, began sobbing in the room with the couple, who were embraced in such a spectacle of love and hope, it made Scrooge run out of their abode with a fervor that he almost collided with the spirit, if the spirit was materialized enough for that to happen. The spirit's arm was still lifted and pointing at the house, but it dropped slowly as Scrooge approached.
Please, Spirit, let me see some tenderness tonight. Show me something that I have done that I will not be remembered as such a miser.
The spirit turned slowly and began to drift away. Scrooge followed, of course, until the spirit came upon a field which Scrooge was not familiar with. As they drifted into the field, Scrooge could make out a headstone which Scrooge gathered belonged to a grave. The spirit stopped a short distance from the grave and raised its arm, pointing ahead for Scrooge to go.
Before I draw near to that grave at which you point, Spirit, answer me one question. Are these shadows I have seen with you the things that will be? Or are they the shadows of the things that may be?
The spirit did not reply. It merely continued to point its arm in the direction of the grave.
Men's courses will foreshadow certain ends to which, if preserved, they must lead. But if the courses be departed from, the ends will change.
Scrooge walked ever so slowly towards the grave, knowing full well what he was going to see, but reluctant to resist the name on it. As he got closer, Scrooge noticed that the grave had been unkempt. Weeds and trees and dirt were all around the grave. He fell before the headstone, dirty and neglected as it was, and read the name, the letters barely readable from the lack of care. Ebenezer Scrooge.
I am not the man I was. I will not be the man I must have been no longer. I will honor Christmas in my heart and try to keep it all the year. I will live in the past, the present, and the future. The spirits of all three shall strive within me. I will not shut out the lessons that they have taught me. Oh, I hereby repent my past deeds and my evil transgressions upon the peers I came across. I forgive myself. I forgive myself.
Stave 5, the end of it. Scrooge was unaware that the last of the spirits had left him alone at the grave, and was unaware that at that very moment of his repentance, he was back in his own room again. But instead of a gravestone that he was holding on to, his own bedpost had taken its place. Scrooge, after a great deal of sobbing, realized that he was back in his own room again. But this time the dawn of first light had seeped its way into his chambers. The dawn of a reborn Scrooge.
I will live in the past, the present, and the future. The spirits of all three shall strive within me. Oh, Jacob Marley, heaven and the Christmas time be praised for this. The shadows of the things that would have been may be dispelled, they will be. I will make sure of it.
Scrooge then attempted to get out of bed and dress himself, but only exceeded in falling all over himself and the bed and the cabinets.
I do not know what to do. I'm as light as a feather. I'm as happy as an angel. I am as merry as a schoolboy. I'm as giddy as a drunken man. A humbug on my old bones.
Scrooge ran to the window and flung it open.
A Merry Christmas to everybody! A Happy New Year to all the world!
Scrooge turned from the window, leaving it open, and ran like a wild animal out of his bedroom and down the stairs of his apartment and outside.
I don't know what day of the month it is. I don't know anything. I'm quite a baby. I don't care, for I'd rather be a baby.
Upon the first person he saw, he violently leapt at them.
Hello there, what's today?
Come again?
The day, what's today? Come now, the date.
The date? Why? It's Christmas Day, sir. Are you quite all right?
Oh, great Scott, Christmas Day indeed. I haven't missed it at all.
Shall I fetch the doctor, sir?
Scrooge pinched the cheek of the young girl and reached into his robe. Scrooge squealed with delight and handed the girl a wad of money.
Merry Christmas, milady. Quick, do you know if that prize turkey is still hanging in the deli market?
It rightly is, sir. No one around here can afford to buy it.
Music to my ears, young lady. Hurry now, take that money, buy it, and have someone send it to the Cratchit residence down on Drury. Then take the rest of what is left and give it to your family. Merry Christmas to you and yours.
Right away, sir, and thank you most generously.
Scrooge, very sure that this task would get done, ran back into his apartment and dressed himself in his finest clothes. He grabbed his cane that he never used and strutted casually back out onto the street. The morning was upon the town, though. People were milling around, and he greeted everybody with a loud and one-tone greeting.
Merry Christmas, everyone! A very pleasant day to all!
Scrooge made his way around town, patting the children on the head, giving beggars money, helping carry Christmas packages, and even stopped to engage in a chorus of carols. Nobody seemed to know who he was, but the men all tipped their hats and the ladies curtsied. Scrooge finally arrived at his nephew's house, and it took him 4 tries before approaching the front door. As he knocked, Scrooge removed his hat and wrangled it in his hands. The door opened, and that lovely woman, who is now his niece, answered the door, looking as beautiful as before. Scrooge melted and forgot why he was there.
May I help you? Oh, good sir, are you looking for someone? I dare say, sir, are you quite all right?
Oh, yes, so terribly sorry to bother you, but I am looking for my nephew.
The woman's visage dramatically changed as she realized who was in front of her. She began sputtering her husband's name and had troubles breathing, and so began to hyperventilate. She fainted into Scrooge's arms, just as Scrooge's nephew came to the entrance.
Why, hello, dear chap. This must be my newest niece I'm holding.
'Twas now the day after Christmas, and Scrooge was in a hurry to get into the office before Bob Cratchit.
But tell me today is the day that Bob isn't on time. Oh, please do make it so.
But Bob was late, as he always was, but this time later than normal. A full 18.5 minutes late.
Hello? What is the meaning of this atrocity? Coming in here at this time of day?
I am very sorry, sir. I am very behind today. It's only once a year, though, sir. I am very sorry.
Oh, right. It's Christmas. I had forgotten, of course. Step towards me, Cratchit. Now, I will tell you what. I will no longer stand for this sort of behavior from a future partner in my company. Therefore, I am going to give you a raise. Merry Christmas, you old tart, you.
Bob Cratchit was not too sure what was transpiring, and it took him quite a while to understand that, first, Scrooge had just called him a future partner. Second, that he was giving him a raise. Thirdly, that Scrooge had wished him a Merry Christmas. And lastly, that Scrooge was entirely not himself at all. But once the realization had sunk in, and Scrooge was done shaking Bob Cratchit's hand most violently and laughing at him, Bob Cratchit smiled at Scrooge and removed his hat.
Can't has your tongue, Bob Cratchit? I've never in my life not heard you utter silence. I guess giving you a raise is the only way to shut you up. A very Merry Christmas to you and your family, Bob Cratchit. I will raise your salary every year at Christmas for as long as you work for me, until, God willing, you can take the reins for me upon my demise. What say you? Shall we discuss this move over a hot supper at your house? How about now? What say you to closing the doors today and spending time with your family?
Bob Cratchit had still not said a word, and he could only imagine his mouth to hang open in total bewilderment.
You must be putting me on, sir. This is surely the biggest joke of all time.
Scrooge laughed wholeheartedly and embraced Bob Cratchit like a brother. Scrooge led Bob Cratchit to his home, where they were greeted by Emily Cratchit and Tina, who hobbled her way from the corner, where it was warmest, to the center of the room.
Took it upon myself to order all of you a turkey yesterday. I pray it was received.
We did, good sir. We had no idea it was you, of course. The delivery man said it was anonymously given, but we have plenty left, as we would not dare to waste such a precious commodity.
No, you must waste it, for there will be more where that comes from, as they say. Right, Cratchit?
Yes. Mr. Scrooge has just given me a raise, dear wife.
Emily Cratchit gasped loudly and almost fainted upon hearing what her husband had just said.
That's not all. Your family will be given a raise every Christmas. And I intend to have Bob Cratchit take over the business for me when I have long gone from this world.
I have no words to say, only sincere gratitude, Mr. Scrooge. How can we ever repay this?
Nonsense, nonsense. This is a gift. I expect no repayment. There is, as they say, a catch. That you allow me to pay for Tina to give proper care and attention to her disability. I have one of the finest doctors all around, and I hardly ever enlist his services. He adores children, and he would be most happy to attend to Tina's health. He may even be able to make her walk without the use of her crutch.
Oh, that would be most wonderful, Mr. Scrooge. Would I be able to run with the other children at school? I saw Edward. They're always running.
I am sure he can make you the fastest runner in the entire county, as long as your parents are for it, of course.
Oh, please, Mom. Please, Dad.
Yes,
We-
Mr. Scrooge,
we accept.
Merry Christmas to you. We accept.
Bless you.
Oh, God bless you.
And a Merry Christmas to you. And a very Merry Christmas to you, Tina. And God bless.
Merry Christmas. And God bless everyone.